Hello, friends and allies. Just give you guys a little bit to see this thing. Welcome to Step Back Tonight. I am your host, Tristan Johnson. So, let's see. It's your meme. Yes, it is, Comrade Jeb. I keep all the memes that everyone makes. Hello! Hi, everybody. It's me, Tristan, that guy that you watch on Tuesday nights. So, for all of you out there in the audience, this is a night. This is Step Back Tonight, the podcast by growing YouTubers for. No, wait, that was the last show I did. This is Step Back Tonight. This is the weekly show that I do, where I hang out with y'all for 3 hours. Just because it's fun. If there is anybody in the chat, and there might be a lot of you there because this has been kind of a bananas week. So, if this is your first time in the stream, please make your names known. There's a lot of regulars here, so I would love to see any new folks who have shown up. And if you have subscribed to Step Back in the last 48 hours, I'd love to meet you, because Thought Slime is awesome. You're a regular lurker, Androfavst. Hello, Luis. Hello, Tomas. Oh man. Wait, I want to answer this one, even though somebody already asked it, but because of the verb, I need to. Did you see the thing about the serfs getting taken down by an alt-right mass flagging campaign? I think the word was campaign, but I think the idea of a mass flagging campaign is much better. So, yeah, I have heard about it. The serfs is... I wasn't familiar. This is the thing. The Serfs is almost definitely going to have their channel brought back, and they're going to be super duper popular because the far right totally doesn't understand that they will that these champagnes that they do will never work. I seem to remember way back in the day, there was a mass flagging campaign against a small German YouTuber that not a lot of people knew about. But then when they had their channel taken down, we circled the wagons and got their channel was eventually brought back, and then eventually they came back, and that little channel was called 3 Arrows. And so this has happened with 3 Arrows. This happened with Sean and Jen. This happened with, what the hell's that guy's name? Big Joel. This is like, it does the literal opposite. What it does is it tells the entire, it's got, it ends up with a tiny YouTube channel, or in this case, a podcast that, I had seen a little bit on Twitter, but I'd never watched anything or listened to anything. And then, of course, friggin' Non-Compete's doing a stream about them. Non-Compete, by the way, catching up fast. Non-Compete's going to have more subscribers than me by the end of this month. It's going to be nuts. And, just like these, I don't know, these flagging campaigns just don't... They seem to always result in the exact opposite. So actually, this joke meme here, made perfect by Comrade Jeb, shows that this comes from a conversation that Thought Slime and I have every once in a while, which is that he gets the ire of the right all the time. And I have been, for some strange reason, extremely forgotten by them. And I've often made the joke, man, I really wish that a like mass flagging campaign would take down one of my videos, because I feel like it would be the best thing that could happen to step back. But I can imagine a few days of my channel not existing would give me non-stop panic attacks, so maybe not the best. But it does seem that like anytime the mass flagging campaigns happen and they take down a YouTube channel, that it just results in them going viral and getting huge. So not a good tactic. Not a good tactic. So I anticipate that the serfs will be brought back pretty soon. When these things happen, usually the appeal process takes maybe about a week or two, but then eventually their channel's brought back. And I have a feeling that their stuff is going to end up in all sorts of, is going to end up all over the place, and they're going to become a household name, and they'll do fine. So, there you go. Okay. Let's see. I thought Maduro was a bad person. Is he not? I'm confused, because it's weird that so many people in Venezuela hate him. He's a complex character. I would say that Maduro does not deserve the bullshit that the West is throwing at him, but also that Maduro has not handled things in the greatest of manners sometimes. But what can you do? Like, what's it called? He's not perfect, but you know what? Show me who is. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of air. It's nice out. It's a nice balmy 8 degrees outside, which for April is actually quite on track, and I am enjoying it. I'm going to turn on the fan a little bit. Hopefully that's not too loud. Tell me if the fan is too loud. All right. The channel's still nuked. They will be back. They'll be back. They'll get their way through the YouTube system. You're guessing Celsius. Yes, it is 8 Celsius. I actually have zero clue how Fahrenheit works. Whenever I'm in America with like my mother-in-law and stuff, they'll say like, oh yeah, it's just like, it's freezing. It's only 586 degrees. And I'm like, okay. Like, you might as well say it's like 420,069 degrees. Like, I have no idea what any of it means. And I don't even like, and there's only one country where it's going to be useful. So I've never even decided to learn. So whatever. I also don't know what a mile is. So, you know, who cares? All right. Hello, friends. Oh, look, there's a cat. Hey, Romeo. All right. Yeah, so I would say we were talking about Maduro and Venezuela. Venezuela, I have complex feelings about. I think that, you know, I don't have that they're. It's a country that has been unfairly maligned, but it is still going through rough times. That's my thing. Maduro does not deserve much of the shit that he gets, but also he doesn't deserve the shit he's getting at him, but he also doesn't deserve to be like treated as some sort of like perfect leader or anything like that either. All right. Let's see. Thoughts on Parliament in the UK voting for Brexit deal for the 3rd time tomorrow? Man, I don't even know how to get started on that. Yeah, to watch live as British Parliament just like shits the bed over and over again on Brexit is quite a thing to watch. So I guess like the only thing I can say to it is like, Brexit is a weird situation, mostly because a country basically voted to commit suicide, which is strange. So what happens is when you are the leaders of a country that are given marching orders through referenda to do something that is going to be objectively terrible for everybody involved, including all of those who voted for it, because the people who voted for it were doing it out of racist spite. And if that's the case, you know, if that's happening, and then at the same time you want to get reelected, so you don't want to be the person who voted for the bad thing, you end up in this situation where the Conservative Party is going to keep proposing worse and worse and worse things, or they're just going to keep trying to propose things. People are going to keep voting against it because MPs need to get reelected, and yet they are also forced to keep doing Brexit. So it's like it's a weird. They're basically in a completely impossible situation, and I don't see any solution to Brexit that doesn't involve them either missing the next deadline or, you know, maybe coming to some sort of conclusion after, like, you know, people get really, really mad. I can see a non-confidence vote or something coming out of this. There are some people who are like, hey, why don't we just, like, you know, maybe we'll get this Brexit thing happening and then Jeremy Corbyn will take over, and then you get, like, the freedom from the European Union, but you also get socialist Britain, where it's like, oh, that'd be kind of cool, I guess, but, yeah. All right, let's see. Argos Panoptes wants to know, how hard is it to learn French? Any cool French/Quebecois authors? Well, I can't speak to the authors thing. I am very much still in the, like, I don't think I could read. I could, like, probably maybe read, like, a Hardy Boys novel in French. Like, that's the French comprehension I have. Even then, it would probably be difficult. When it comes to how hard is it to learn French, it depends upon your language. French for English speakers it's harder than German. It is harder than German because Germanic languages, the grammar makes a lot more sense for German than for English speakers. So it is a Romance language, but also English has a lot of its basis in Romance languages. So French is probably one of the easier languages for an English native speaker to speak. But if you're a Spanish native speaker, French will be a lot easier to learn than, say, an Anglophone. So it really depends upon what language you're coming from. But French has a few quirks to it that I should probably mention if anybody is interested in learning French. One, like a lot of the Romance languages compared to English, it has a much smaller vocabulary. What makes English weird is that it has, like, over 500,000 words in its dictionary, while, like, French has probably something like 150,000. But also, a thing that is notable about French is that its spoken grammar is a lot simpler than its written grammar, and that it's not immediately obvious how a word is pronounced based on what you see in the text. Which means, and this is a thing that has a lot of issues with even native French speakers, that it is very easy to learn how to speak French and not learn how to read or write. And it's also actually, for all three, it's very easy to either learn to speak French, learn to write in French, or learn to read French, and not have the other skills. So, like, you could be somebody who can read French and write in French, but not be able to speak it, and vice versa. And for me, I am very much somebody who focused when I was learning French to focus on speaking French. And so for me, my spoken French is a lot stronger than my reading and writing. But you do end up, if you don't have a good hard education, because of the Académie Française, which is like the French, like, kind of standardization of French in France, if you don't learn proper writing, and written French grammar is extremely complicated, then you can easily fall behind. Like, for French, for speaking and everyday speaking in French, you probably only need about 4 verb tenses, while French in general has about 19. And oftentimes for conjugating verbs in different tenses, requires something like a book called a Becherel, which I think a lot of like Romance languages have, but yeah, you just like it's pretty tough. It's a pretty tough language to learn how to write properly. It's a very easy language to learn how to get a little bit with. It's very easy to learn the basics and to learn how to speak simple things. Then once you pass a certain threshold, it starts getting really, really hard to get better at it. And me, like many other people in the world, have probably gotten to about the extent of where you can get, where it's easy. And then if I wanted to push further, I would need to get into the real tough stuff, which I am under not much inclination to do. All right. Not to mention there's, for anybody who doesn't speak any language but English, there's also word gender, which is a whole thing that English speakers have no easy way to learn. This happens a lot for English speakers. English speakers find it very alien to learn about how words have genders. I think like there's very few languages that don't have it in some form or another, but yeah. My French, the French skills I have, I came specifically from living in Quebec for 3 years, but primarily in an Anglophone area. And then the last month and a half or so before I moved back to Ontario to go to grad school in 2013, I took a thing called, for anybody who's Canadian, you might know about this, it's called J'explore, which is part of a federal government program to teach either Anglophones French or Francophones English. And they have an English version, and basically they pay you about $60 a week, and they give you free room and board for about a week, and usually a free meal every day. And for 5 weeks, you are speaking French all the time. You are taking French class in the morning. You're taking French tutorials in the afternoon. You are doing a social activity in French in the evening. And on top of that, you are expected, they have monitors and everything like that, to be speaking French in all of your person-to-person conversations for that entire 5 weeks. Being caught speaking in English is you get a billet rouge, a red ticket, and if you are caught speaking English too many times, you can be sent to the principal's office. And if you're caught speaking English too many times after that, you could be sent out. You could be kicked out of the program. So for those 5 weeks, you learn entirely in French. And I did that in the summer of 2013 in Sherbrooke, and it went really great. I actually thought it was one of the better moments of my life. And then I felt very fluent in French right after I finished. And I think ever since then, I haven't really spoken French to anybody on a regular basis since, which means that it's atrophied quite a bit. Because another thing about speaking multiple languages is that if you're not practicing it all the time, you're going to struggle. But yeah, J'explore. If you're a Canadian and you want to sign up for that, you totally should, because if you can get in the lottery to get the grant to go, it's one of the best experiences you can have. That was a long answer to how hard is French to learn, but I thought it was really cool, and it was one of the more fun stories of my 20s. 2013, I was like, I would have been like, what? I can do this. I can do math. I would have been like 24. Yeesh. Duolingo is nice, Jeb, but like, I find that Duolingo, from somebody who's like tried to learn languages, it's good for like learning a little bit, but really you're going to run into a wall with, like, Duolingo can only really get you so far. And I think that it gets you pretty far for, like, an app. Like, as far as an app goes, it can teach you quite a bit of your language. But really the test of how to speak in a language is you really need to just spend a lot of time speaking it with a native speaker. That is really the best way to learn a language, if you can. Duolingo, I feel like, will help you keep your French skills up or keep your language skills up, but it will never get you to, like, the point when you're able to maintain a conversation in it. Because you really have to learn how to not translate. The thing about Duolingo that I don't like is that it focuses on translation, and I think that the best way to learn a language where it actually sticks is you kind of need to twist your moral pathways so that you're no longer thinking in translation thought and that you are thinking in the language. And that was where, when I was learning French, that was the part where things started to really hit, where I was like, instead of like thinking what I wanted to say in English and then translating it into French and then saying that, it was just thinking in French. And that's really the part that really that changes things. And Duolingo is not super conducive to doing that because it gets you constantly translating, and it also doesn't force you to conjugate words or to put sentences together or to think of vocabulary or things like that. Not to mention, it doesn't train you on accents, it doesn't train you on colloquialisms, it doesn't train you on just like the total non-grammatically correct way that everybody speaks compared to how they write and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Argos has another question. What is the ethics in defunding the Special Olympics? Well, yeah, so the Trump administration recently defunded the Special Olympics, which is super shitty. I don't know about ethics. I mean, like, it's just a moral thing. Like, the Special Olympics is a great institution that celebrates, you know, athletes with disabilities. Well, that's a Paralympics, but with intellectual disabilities, I should say. And it was not an expensive, like, discretionary spending line. It was really nothing, but yet they did it. And I think that it just seems to be, like, just abjectly cruel. I don't know if I'm not really an ethicist, so I can't really speak to the ethics of it. Like, I would, like, if I were like a philosopher, I'd like break it down, but it's like, in my mind, I'm just like, that's really shitty. You probably shouldn't do that. The Special Olympics is a good thing, and why don't you just, like, you know, have more of it? I do hope that the Special Olympics organizing committee can find a way to keep it going despite the defunding. I really hope that there's something that they can do to make it keep going, because it would be really, really sad to see the Special Olympics go away. Okay. Let's see. Is it Kelly's first time in the stream? I don't think I've seen them in these parts before. Oh, she's always watching. She very rarely misses my streams. She just she's usually just in the next room, either listening to it or listening to it and playing Skyrim, which is what she's doing right this minute.
Hi, everybody.
So if she's here and I'm doing a stream, she's usually watching it. She's just usually not very interactive in the chat because she's playing Skyrim. Is Kelly his sister? No, Kelly is my wife. It's not Alabama. Yeah. Sister wife. C.R. Smith, AOC and Ben Shapiro are star-crossed lovers. Your thought? I don't know the story behind this, but I want to because the memes are pretty great. So, like, I guess Ben Shapiro, who loves to do these, like, not, okay. First, we need to talk about debates and about, I think, like, Ben Shapiro is like this guy. He's this conservative pundit who sort of, he has this thing where he's like, oh, we got to do debates. I want to debate you. Let's debate. And the thing is he comes from, like, a debate club style of debate where he's like, all he does is, like really dumb intellectual browbeating and, like, verbal circling around people, and, like, and then he'll say that he destroyed you with facts and logic. And, like, and this is, like, you know, and everyone says, like, oh, like, debate Carl Gunn and, like, all those kinds of things. Like, this isn't, oh, Kelly, somebody said you're too cute for me.
Oh, that's nice.
So, like, I think that these debates like that are completely pointless and performative, and they don't accomplish anything. Like,
Oh, I think 25580 was making a joke about me being in the street.
So Carl, so like those things, and I think, I don't know exactly what the story is. Maybe somebody in the chat would know, but Ben Shapiro probably asked AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is the congresswoman from New York's 14th district and is an absolute boss. I think he probably challenged her to a debate. She said no, and he's been making a big stink about it, but I don't know the actual story. But Star-Crossed Lovers, like, I don't know. That's lame. AOC has already got a boyfriend, and I'm sure he's way cooler than Ben Shapiro. I'm sure Ben Shapiro, though, like, from the way that a lot of conservatives talk about AOC, there is a whole lot of, like, pent-up sexual frustration over the fact that she's, like, an attractive young woman. Like, that comes up so that it's so obvious from the way they act. There's something totally that is literally the entire story. Ha! Knew it. But I know that, like, Ben Shapiro's, like, you know, whining about not having a debate, because this is how the left can shoot themselves in the foot and give, like, attention to the right. Like, the reason why Ben Shapiro is doing this is because he knows that people will pay attention to it. And honestly, by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like, giving him a platform, like, she would be, like, giving him viewers and attention, and then by the mere exposure effect, putting more people going down that funnel towards right-wing radicalization. So, the best thing to do with those people is to not give them attention, especially when they demand it. Trust me, like, why else do you think that they want to debate? I don't know. I find the whole, like, let's debate this, like, yeah, it's like someone said down there, it's pure sophistry, and I think that it's complete dumb. It's dumb, and no one should do it. You will. I can't say never, because that puts a lot, but I feel like I have no desire at the moment to ever, quote unquote, debate somebody on the right. First of all, debating somebody on the right would be a fruitless exercise, because conservative thought is not based in reality, and right now we're in a situation where conservatives and anybody really right of center can only cling on to their political beliefs because we live in a society that lets them feel entitled to their own facts. They cling on to ideas that have been shown objectively to not work, but they do so anyway. And because we have a culture that thinks that it's more important to make sure that conservatives don't feel like you're being mean to them, rather than pointing out that they are, like, factually wrong about many of the things that they advocate for, shows that there's no point in debating them. Like, I can't debate with somebody about why, like, industrial processes create gas and how the greenhouse effect works and how climate change is real. Like, you can't do that. I can't, like, argue with facts and logic and science that, like, people of color are human. Like, it's, like, not a thing. It's so dumb. And like, there's no point in debating these things. Not to mention, by agreeing to debate topics, you are in a way saying that it is a subject that is up for debate. And I don't see that as, like, a thing that we should do. You should not debate whether or not trans women are women because they are women, and there's no real, like, legitimate argument for that. And so, I don't know. The right, as we've seen with the serfs, this is like an example too. Their whole tactic is to cry referee, play foul, and try to think that they can treat politics like it's a game. That they can use, that they can abuse the rules in order to get ahead. And I think that is not something I want to participate in. I don't think that conservatives have an intellectually developed enough worldview to be worth discussing. Because it's usually just thing different from me, thing bad, or thing disagrees with capitalism, therefore doesn't exist. Those are like their two positions if you really boil everything down. All right. Now, debate can happen. Like, I feel like there was a while, like, I think that there are actually, like, useful debates, but it's not the kind of debate that Ben Shapiro would host. A debate, for one, I think somebody mentioned, as River Ransom very eloquently pointed out, a debate typically needs a moderator. A debate without a moderator is a discussion. And also on top of that, they need to have a debate where a debate has to be coming from the original positions where both sides can be convinced that the other is right, or that they can come to some form of synthesis. You know, Hegelian, right? Like, position A, position B, either position A wins, position B wins, or they come to a new position C. Like, for example, one debate that I think that maybe I should have done, but we never got around to it, was Kevin Logan and I were going to do a debate about prisons, where I was going to come from the position of being a prison abolitionist, and he was going to come from the idea of, I guess, like, the Nordic model of prisons. And we were thinking about having a debate about that, but it never came through. But that is, like, an example of a debate where we could have come to some sort of interesting conclusion, because we were not coming to it out of trying to destroy the other's ass with facts and logic or something. Because that whole, like, takedown culture is just like I think that the Big Joel video really, like, opened those doors for me in a lot of ways. That, like, a lot of the, like, ownage and response video and takedown culture on the right, and also to a small extent on the left, just feels like it's just like really dumb toxic masculine power politics, where, like, it's not about coming to consensus, it's not about progressing the discussion, it's about who can display power more so that they get more more young men who are impressionable to feel like they want to gravitate towards someone who looks like they're authoritative and powerful. And I don't want to play any part of that. I am far too much of a beta cuck soy boy to do that. All right. Hey, it's that jaywalking punk anarchist. All right. Before Blair's Labour had workers owning the means of production in their manifesto, is it dishonest for a party to put that in the manifesto when it isn't really possible in a capitalist state? No, I think it works as an end goal. There are still socialist parties. Like, if they wanted to dismantle it. If that was, you know, I think that taking it out showed that the desires of the party have been going away. That the Labour Party had changed, obviously, with Tony Blair. I would be under the impression, like, my opinion would be that, you know, if you're going to put it in your party charter, you better have that as a goal. But it doesn't mean that, like, hey, we can't do this under capitalism, therefore you shouldn't do that. It's like, screw that. Like, it shows that you are vehemently disagreeing with capitalism as a model of economic production, which I think is a perfectly valid thing for a political party to do. All right. Is democracy... All right. Is democracy the only ethical form of government? I view democracy as unethical because why should I or others who don't know how to run a nation be allowed to lead? Well, C.R. Smith, that's not exactly what democracy means. I think that the issue with democracy is that it has been spoiled by calling a slightly democratic oligarchy, which is what we have now, democracy. The problem that we have right now is not that we have too much democracy. That is the thing that we need to learn. That is lesson number one. It's not that we have too much democracy, it's that we have not enough. People, like, there is this myth that in order to decide what people want, you have to be very fancy, very wealthy, go to all the right schools, and, you know, look like, you know, be preparing for it since you were, like, 2.5 years old, like Cory Booker. And, like, you know, you have to come from the right class of people, you know. The average Joe doesn't know what they want. They're just too stupid to manage themselves. And I think that is elitist and bullshit. The problem is not that we have democracy. The problem is that we have a representative system in that we do not participate in democracy. Democracy is not a thing we do. Democracy is a thing that we occasionally do once every 4 years, where we choose which member of the aristocratic elite are going to dictate our laws for us. This is, and then if they fuck up, we have no way to take back our vote, except to wait for another 4 years until they've already destroyed everything to do it again. This is not democracy. This is just an oligarchy with a menu. Like, okay, you get to choose from, like, the asshole in red or the asshole in blue about which one is going to be the person who somehow has your interest at heart when neither of them do. And also, it results in the power being taken away from the citizen and moved towards people who are best at succeeding in psychological manipulation. That is how you win elections. You don't win elections by having good policy, because trust me, we would be in Bernie Sanders' like 5th term by now if it was for that. It comes from who can perform well, who can rejigger the machines that choose who gets to be a candidate. It's about who can raise the most amount of money to get yourself more out there in media and, you know, twist people into thinking where you are. It shows that the most powerful person in the United States, for example, right now, is a person who used, like, professional wrestling techniques in order to get elected president. Like, it's not democracy. Democracy would be, hey, I want to decide what happens to my community, and I get to talk, and I get to speak, and I get a voice, just like everybody else in my community. And abstracting that to one person, now I will say the last person who we elected I was pretty happy with in this area anyway. In this one riding was fine. But because of, you know, the way that democracy works right now is a bunch of, like, dumbass white people in the suburbs elected a freaking evil gas bag to be the Premier of Ontario. And, like, now he is, like, he is interacting with Ontario like freaking Godzilla does with Tokyo, and I didn't have any voice. I didn't vote for him. I have no say in that, but that's just happening because people who I'll never meet were able to speak for me, and I think that's dumb. I think that we need direct democracy. We need all politics to be local politics. We need just to completely destroy the concept of that representative democracy is democracy, and not just, I guess, people are like in the line, oligarchy with a menu. And trust me, I think people will be able to take care of themselves, because saying that like, oh, the world's too complicated, government's too complicated for the simple folk to understand, that's like the bullshit that like Ezra Klein and like what's his name? Matt Iglesias. Matt Iglesia. Yeah. Like that's what like people like that think. And honestly, look what like having only the most smartest of Vox people who luckily they're so kind to explain things for us. Like look what having those people has resulted in. Our planet is literally cooking on its own exhaust fumes, and like people are objectively worse off than they have been 40 years ago. Like nothing has gotten better. Nobody's life has improved except for like 6 people, and we're like literally watching society decay as we destroy the last remaining resources on this planet. So who are these super brain geniuses who have been guiding the ship of state for so long? I don't know. I think this is ridiculous. Also, Vox is bad. Except Jeff Stein. Jeff Stein, you could do better. You gotta find a new site. Comrade Jeb, should we start a battle of Step Back History versus Thought Slime like PewDiePie versus T-Series because Thought Slime is going to pass you in 2 months? No. I would be 100% happy for Thought Slime to pass me in 2 months. I think that Thought Slime is a better channel than Step Back is right now. I think that he's doing some great stuff. Talking to him behind the scenes, I have seen the kind of work he puts into his stuff, and I think that it's great. And Step Back, like, if anything, the takedown video and the sort of response that has come out of it, with the amount of subscribers who have come in through his shout out basically of me in the video, has shown that his channel's in a much healthier state than mine. Like, I think the only reason why Step Back looks like it's a bigger channel is because it's been around longer. And so I think that I am perfectly happy to see Thought Slime shoot ahead, because that is a sign that the world is right. Now, I am going to, over the next few months, over the next 3 months or so, I'm going to go through a process of sort of reinventing Step Back. And hopefully that will jumpstart the ship again. But for the moment, that's perfectly fine with me. Okay. So if we're going to start a sub-battle of Step Back History versus Thought Slime, I'm going to be telling people to subscribe to Thought Slime. As you can see, he's already telling people to subscribe to me. Yesterday you said pre-human history was a new field. I thought it was called paleontology, or that it was like 180 years old. Well, pre-human history as a new field is what I mean as like historians. So there's something... so yeah, paleontology has been around forever, obviously. That's a study of life before life in, the fossil record and stuff like that. That's one thing. But there is something called deep history and big history, which is trying to do 2 different things, but they are new fields. You have to realize that archaeology and paleontology and history are 3 different departments. Archaeology is its own thing. Paleontology is actually usually in geology departments, not in like the humanities like history is. But deep history versus big history. Big history is an attempt to try to see all of history through the context of the Big Bang until now, which is trying to recontextualize where humanity fits in a big universe with energy and systems and complexity theory and things like that. Really cool books that I've read on that are escaping my mind the titles right now, but I do think that Big History's got some really cool things to study about the complexity of societies and complex networks and systems, and how this is out of Big History is where you see things like the Anthropocene and trying to re-understand like geological epochs through humanity. Deep History is looking at humanity and humanity in the context of the biological processes of the planet. So deep history is like studying humans as biological entities in an ecosystem, and how we need to decenter humans from our understanding of the past, and how even in our previous societies, like if you went 3,000 years ago to ancient Egypt, you know, there would still be more animals than people, and we need to sort of break down the intellectual barriers between human and not human, and living and not living, and like this is like deep history, and it's the big book that kind of comes up when people talk about this is called Body Without Organs, or there's another one too called like Thousand Plateaus or something like that, where it's about trying to like break down linearity and like ideas of how time work, and it's some really complicated, weird stuff, but it's sort of at the cutting edge of like new historical disciplines that are really challenging our assumptions about how humanity and society work. And it's already paid off in the field quite a bit. Some of the newer disciplines in history are really interesting stuff, and are becoming interesting intellectual movements. Like, for example, we did not think until relatively recently, until we started having these kinds of conversations, to do children's history, to do the history of what child culture was like in the past, because we were so adult-centric. There's animal history, the history of like how we have had our relationships with animals, and our relationship with and how animals functioned as part of human society. And food history. Food history is like one of the latest subsets of cultural history, and it is fascinating. If you guys if you watched my video on beer and witches, that is actually the result of a keynote address that was given at a historical conference that I went to in 2015, I want to say. And in that conference, they talked about beer and how our understanding about the role that beer played in our culture actually said a lot about gender. And I think that like these kinds of new movements in the field have actually resulted in a much more interesting and strong and robust discipline. And I'm really glad that I got to read a whole bunch of it to do part of my PhD, at least the what's called the comprehensive exams, which is when you read a whole lot of stuff in a really short amount of time to be called an expert on a subject so that you can teach at the university level. All right. So that's what I meant about pre-human history being new. What is your opinion about what's happening right now with Canada? What are you talking about? Are you talking about SNC Lavalin? Because that's weird. I don't think we haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet, but basically, for the people who are not Canadian, the big thing that's going on in Canada right now is that Justin Trudeau, it's becoming more and more apparent that Justin Trudeau basically tried to strong-arm his attorney general to let a engineering corporation get away with crimes in order to preserve jobs in Quebec. That was basically entirely what the job was about. That's entirely what it's all boiling down to. And he keeps denying it, and more stuff keeps coming out that that he did do it. And the former attorney general now, because she got shuffled in cabinet and then she left, and now she's not even in the Liberal Party anymore, has shown that, like, she's like, her name is Jody Wilson-Raybould, and she was the first Indigenous person to be in Canada's cabinet, and the first Indigenous woman, definitely, and the first Indigenous attorney general. So, like, a lot of firsts. And Justin Trudeau ran on this, like, I'm a feminist, I'm going to have a 50-50 cabinet. And then he just, like, treated this woman like absolute garbage. And when she started criticizing Justin Trudeau, the Liberal Party, he, like, started getting the Liberal Party to start turning on her and start talking about how much of a problem she is. And it's just, like, absolute shit. And I'm really, it's really depressing. But also, it's an election year this year, and Justin Trudeau is up for re-election, and we'll see what happens with that, because Canada's election this year is going to be really, really weird. We've got Justin Trudeau went from being the youngest leader of the major political parties to the oldest in 4 years. We have a center-right conservative party that's trying to ride the line between radical fascists, you know, the sort of, like, radical fascist uprising that's been happening in the whole world, trying to ride that, but at the same time still stay prim and proper. Meanwhile, a far-right fascist leader named Maxime Bernier is starting a, like, actively, like, nationalist, like, far-right party called the People's Party of Canada. Nobody knows how far that's going to go, how well that's going to resonate with people, given that that Quebec just recently elected given that Quebec just elected a right-wing nationalist government in their province, they could definitely see them gravitate towards somebody like Maxime Bernier. And then on top of that, we have the first leader of who's a person of color in the NDP, who's named Jagmeet Singh, and he's kind of kind of lame. He's kind of just a lame leader. He was definitely. We wouldn't be having conversations about the NDP being dead if it was Nikki Ashton running. If Nikki Ashton would have fucking ruled this election, but oh well. So that's where that's basically what's happening in Canada. Our politics, federal politics, is right now completely, like, gone off the rails, and there's an election coming up, and we have no idea how it's all going to shake out. Because Canadian elections are very short compared to, like, American elections, and so a lot can happen in a very short amount of time. This time last year, we were still thinking that. that the Ontario election was a lock-in for the Liberals, because the leader of the Conservative Party had just gone under for committing sexual harassment against his employees. So, like, a lot can happen in a very short amount of time. And now freaking Rob Ford's brother is the Premier of Ontario. So, yeah. All right, so Comic Book Kid, thank you for the $5 super chat. Very much appreciated. Loved your video about Ethiopia. Will you be doing any more vids about newly discovered ancient African civilizations? I don't know about any of those, but could be cool. Let's find out. Right now, I'm trying to slow down my video making process, so if you want to suggest a video subject to me, it's got to be really, really cool. But I do think that we do not cover Africa enough in Step Back and in the history field in general. So I definitely would be very, very eager to hear about really great stories in African history to cover. So, yeah. Holy Roman Socialist Empire when? Man, is that what's going to replace the EU? I never made any progress in language class because I assumed learning a new language meant memorizing the entire dictionary. I assumed that was impossible and made no effort. Oh man. No, it's learning words is actually not nearly as hard as learning the grammar and kind of getting into the habit of being able to construct sentences and have conversations. That's honestly the harder part about learning a language than, say, like just memorizing the words. Vocabulary is like a part, and it can be difficult, but that's flashcards. Learning how to conjugate verbs, learning how to say things is much more difficult, and that is the harder part. You have to kind of rewire your brain to think in a completely different operating system, which is difficult. Okay. What's your thought on the state of the 2020 primary, specifically fundraising that came out today that Bernie has raised $18.2 million from 525,000 individual donors, average donation of $20. Yeah, so Joe Loves History, that is something cool. I did see that news this morning. So it was announced that on the backs of 525,000 donors, the Sanders campaign has raised $18 million, which is unprecedented. There has never been such a, first of all, huge surge in interest in a candidate, but at the same time, like an average of $20 per candidate shows that there is a serious, massive populist grassroots campaign building around the Sanders campaign. And, you're asking about the status of the 2020 race, and given that, given all that shit that just went down about Joe Biden over the weekend, to me, at the moment, now a lot can happen in a primary, but at the moment, it's everybody who, given everyone who's not the Washington Post, should pretty much be in lockstep thinking, like, honestly, polls-wise, fundraising-wise, popularity-wise, Sanders is the only game in town right now. Everybody else is a sideshow. If you looked at if you discount Joe Biden, who hasn't announced yet, and also has probably just tanked his chances of running because somebody exposed the fact that he's been creepy and everybody has known he's been creepy for decades, shows that like Sanders leads everybody else by like more than double. Like, I think the highest I've seen anybody who's not Sanders is like 8%. And that's like Kamala Harris, who has like shit tons of money lined up behind her. I haven't seen anything since like everybody else is in single digits. And yeah, those things can change, especially once like billionaire money starts backing up behind whatever centrist of the week they're trying to throw out. Like, I think somebody was showing that like last week their attempt was, if you looked at like CNN, they're just trying to find a new centrist that people will like every week. And like last week it was Buttigieg. Callie, help.
I don't know how to say it.
Let's just go with Buttigieg, because that's a funny thing to say. They were trying to shuffle out Buttigieg. They were trying to shuffle out like Kamala Harris, like happened and then is gone because she has an extremely long track record of treating people like shit, especially like denying surgery to trans people in prison and like all sorts of nasty stuff. So like there's not much there. And a lot of other campaigns, even though like there are people who've been trying to run for president for like a decade, it's not their time. It's not their time. They don't have the recognition. Like Cory Booker is trying to run. I think that Cory Booker, like he happened and then it's just bleh. like it's just like complete like non-starter of a campaign. Kamala Harris came out a little bit stronger, but she's kind of fizzled out pretty fast too. And I do think that both of them are more likely to be candidates who will be probably taken more seriously in future presidential campaigns. Like, people don't realize that some people, like, who run for president do it more than once before, things get... And honestly, the presidential campaigns of Kamala Harris and Cory Booker will probably do more to get their name out there than anything else. But honestly, like, they're at the point they're at now. Their campaigns are not going anywhere fast, but also the what's it called? The things are on... The Democratic primaries are right now on slow burn because... we're still like 10 months out from the first primary. We are 3 months from the first debate. So it's not like the end of the world. Like it's still really early days. The first debate is in July. And so we do need to like consider that like things are like, it's not like it hasn't started yet. Everybody else, like, even if I like them, like, I don't know. No one seems to really be all that excited about Kirsten Gillibrand or this is the problem. I'm having trouble even thinking of some of them. That guy who used to be the housing secretary under Obama, whose name is like something Castro, Julian Castro. Does that sound right to you, Kelly?
Yeah, maybe.
The guy who's like the ultimate centrist, where he was like, the left wants free university and the right wants paid university, so we'll give you half free university.
Don't forget about Amy Klobuchar.
Oh yeah, Amy Klobuchar, who is known for being one of the worst human beings to work under and actively like throws shit at her employees. Oh man, yeah. So like those are like the headliners at the moment, and honestly, like. At the moment, like, with the way that the straw poll is going right now, Sanders is the only game in town. Now, the thing is that the corporate media is doing literally everything it can to try and find anybody else who won't challenge the millionaire's status. And so they're like going, like I said, they're pushing out Buttigieg now to be like, look, Buttigieg, have that happen. But I do think that, I think that it is, yeah, Kamala Harris is a reminder that prosecutors are still an integral part of the shitty justice system, not just the police officers. Correct. It's a situation in which not much has happened yet, and all the campaigns that have started, all but one have pretty much, like, come out and just, they're just kind of there. And they haven't, like, even though, like, I really like Elizabeth Warren. She's not a great campaigner. I've been watching her Twitter. Like, she says nice things. Like, I actually really, really like Elizabeth Warren. I just know that she's like, there's a reason why she runs for senator of Massachusetts. Like, she's not, like, Sanders, like, has that thing, I don't know how to describe it. The other thing that's really big in the Democratic primaries is that this is the most Democratic primaries probably in American history. This is the first Democratic primaries where there's no superdelegates for the first round, which is much more similar to how the Republican primary process works. And so I could very much see, I'm very much seeing a mirror of the 2016 Republican primary race going on right now, where you're going to have Sanders extremely popular, everybody likes him in the base, and yet the corporate media is going to try and say why his election's impossible, he'll never win the nomination, while he wins every single state. And that will probably be the story. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens. Depending upon how many drinks I've had, I would go between trying to think about what the centrists will do if Bernie clinches the nomination. Because Silberme would say they'll probably grit their teeth and support Sanders and say vote for Bernie. Those people who said that Bernie is an evil Russian agent who's come to destroy America and is even worse than Trump or whatever, they'll grit their teeth and say it. Two drinks in me will say that they will that they'll support Trump That there are some, I think there are some centrists who would rather support Trump than Sanders for president. You get a little bit more drinks in me that they'll pull like, what's it called? They'll pull like the Starbucks guy to run as a third party, and like they will like, you know, they'll let Trump get a second term just to deny Bernie a first term. And then you get me shit-faced, and I would say that Sanders wins a nomination. I put 50-50 chance that he survives to the Democratic National Convention, and that someone doesn't just like shoot him. That I don't actually believe, but you know, if it happened, I wouldn't be surprised. I really hope it doesn't. I really hope that the best scenario happens and that Sanders gets the nomination. Everybody, even the people who are grumpy about it, will say, "Hey, country over whatever." I guess we're just gonna have to just tolerate horrible things like public health care and free education. You know, those terrible, terrible things, in order to get Trump out of office, and hopefully that will get them through. I have no idea. I think of like, I do think that there's a lot of people who say they dislike Sanders' policies because they think they're unpopular. But once he gets the nomination, they realize they are popular, that they'll come around, because a lot of the things that Sanders puts forward are very common sense things that most other countries did decades ago. And so, yeah. I would really like to see, given the state, like, the thing is, given the way things are right now, I would see Sanders being president. That's the way things look to me at this moment. Now, that is with extraordinarily low confidence, because the election is still a year and 7 months from now. So it's over a year and a half from now. And on top of that, a lot can happen. We still have the whole primary process and the general election process to get through. I think Sanders will do fine in both. I think that this is the time. I think that this is the narrative. That this is, too many terrible things have happened, and ever since 2008, people have been suffering. Now we have the rise of anti-Semitism, the rise of fascism, and it's time to do the things that will finally fix the deep-seated issues in American history. And it doesn't hurt to all the Nazis to have the first Jewish president. Oh, I completely forgot that Tulsi Gabbard's running. But yeah, I think somebody said that there are a lot of candidates like Tulsi Gabbard, like Kamala Harris, like Cory Booker, who are, they're still relatively young. This is their first campaign for president, and it's likely that they'll probably run again. Like, Cory Booker is even like rerunning for his Senate seat, so like it shows he doesn't even have that high confidence in him winning this time. And none of them came out the door running. Like, there's no like overwhelming desire for anybody except for the person who raised $18 million on 525,000 people over a year and a half out from the election. I feel like that says something. That is a statement. Abjectly cruel. Wasn't that one of Trump's campaign promises? Yeah, basically. Thoughts on birth control being spread to fish, preventing them from reproducing? That's thoughts on climate change causing Beira, Mozambique to be completely flooded. Yeah, Argos, you have pointed out that the ways that our water system, the ways that we pollute the water, and the ways that climate change work are really shitty. I don't know. I can't really have thoughts on those. They're bad. I'm not really a climate scientist or a pollution environmental engineer, but those are bad things. That's like, and yeah, there is some like serious shit going down with like how antidepressants and I think birth control pills are affecting, like those kind of synthetic hormones are affecting aquatic life when they go downstream. Which we got to really think about. Honestly, I think if it's Sanders versus Trump, as they're saying in the chat, if it's Sanders versus Trump, I don't think it'll be close. Like, you have a lot of like, there was a poll very close to the 2016 election that showed that 2/3 of voters, so this is 2/3 of Americans who voted, said they disliked both candidates. So, and that is the largest segment of Trump's voting base, is people who didn't like him, but they just decided that they liked Clinton slightly more, or they disliked Clinton slightly more. And so that's the thing at the moment. Sanders is, as of most polling has been since the 2016 election, the most popular politician in America. There are actually very few people who don't make 7 figures and write columns for newspapers who dislike Bernie Sanders. And so I think that, 4 years of Trump being Trump, followed by a Democratic Party that would actually line up behind Sanders, like that would be... those are the kinds of elections that happen once in a generation. That would be a seismic change in American history. That would be historic. To think about what's being debated and what is the issues, I think that with hope for things that will actually make people's lives better, that you could probably see one of the greatest landslides in American history. That's probably me being optimistic about the some people in America, but I honestly think that. I do think that a lot of people voted for Trump because they saw their lives getting worse. They saw Trump saying that things are getting worse. And they saw Hillary Clinton saying, everything's fine. How dare you vote for anyone but me? And they said, like, fuck you, and voted for Trump. And you know what? I bet it felt really good. Because you know what? That's not an original thought. I am parroting somebody who said this in the run up to the 2016 election, and was right about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And it is documentary filmmaker Michael Moore. And Michael Moore nailed the 2016 election hard. And I think that this is it's going to happen. Americans want to vote for something, anything, and I think this will happen. All right. Do you think continuing to breed dogs with bad congenital defects should be outlawed? That's an interesting. Sure. Yes. I feel like dog breeds in general are kind of a gross concept, and we should stop doing that. But I'm just one man. Do you think the assassinations by anarchists in history are justified? Some of the monarchs that were assassinated was horrible to the people. I mean, as a pacifist, I would say no, because most of those assassinations resulted in horrible backlash that probably killed more people and made people's lives more objectively worse than the life under that monarch would be. And I think that it's just not the solution that leads to positive change. It might feel good. It might think like it's like the what's it called? The justified thing to do, but honestly, it's just not the thing that works, and history seems to show that over and over and over again. Did you watch the Serfs before their channel got nuked? No, I had seen them on Twitter a couple times, but I don't really know that much. Where do you draw the lines between free speech and hate speech? Hate speech is specifically targeting a group of people and usually is a call for them to do something about them, usually in the form of genocide or advocating for violence against them. This is actually, what's it called? In Canada, hate speech is illegal, and there's very specific definitions of it. I think they're actually a bit too tight, but, you know, that's just me. Or I think that the definition is too narrow for what is hate speech, but whatever. It's really awful when somebody tries to debate trans rights with me as a trans person, because it's like my life is on the line. Yeah, don't debate anybody about whether or not trans people are people. Like, they're people. Like, that is not a thing that should be up for debate. All right. Are you worried you'll get trapped in Latin America if the wall goes up while you're on holiday? I mean, if I starve to death because of hard Brexit, this could be both of our last stream. No, even if Trump made his wall go up, I don't live in America, so I'm fine. If he closes the border with Mexico, that doesn't impact me because I'm Canadian. And we're not driving, we're flying, so there's no wall that tall. Thoughts on whirling dervishes? Are they cool? Would you like it? Would you do it with your eyes open? Which of the 3 Mexicos are you going to? Oh man, that's a good story. Somebody, I think it was like on Fox News, where they accidentally put text up that there's something's happening in 3 Mexican countries, and it was like, everyone was like, what the fuck? Yeah, just goes to show that ended up on a corporate TV network. I am going to a state in Mexico called Quintana Roo, which is its southernmost province, or southernmost state, where it borders with Belize. That's where I am going. Deep into the Yucatan Peninsula. Alright, now let's get to whirling dervishes. So whirling dervishes are a group of, I want to say, they're Sufi. I don't remember if they're Sufi or they're their own. No, Sufis hate them, I think. It's a form of Islamic mysticism where, in order to sort of experience God, they do this this sort of twirling dance. And they spin so much that it makes them dizzy. And it sort of restricts blood flow to the brain. And this causes them to have, like, a sort of, they're mystics, right? So they believe that you experience the divine, you experience the supernatural. They're Sufi, not Sunni or Shia, so they're Sufi Muslims. All right. So mysticism is the idea of trying to engage with religion through not through doctrine, but through experience and through direct experience of the divine. And they do this sort of dance to experience God. That's the idea behind it. And their dance is beautiful. The clothing they wear is amazing. Their shows are really cool to see. And hey, if it makes the dervishes if it makes them feel like they have a complete spiritual life, then have at it. I think it's a beautiful part of their culture. They play a prominent role in the Anarchist Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson. Man, I gotta read that at some point. Thoughts on devoting almost all political focus towards seizing the bread via setting up community gardens and farms? I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's the only thing we should be doing, but I do think it's a good thing to do. Yeah, because things like the reason why so many people are turning towards radicalism in the right is because they are afraid for the very basics of their material existence. And honestly, most people will back the ideology that gives them food, lodging, and, the things they need to live. So, there's that. And that's why socialists, anarchists, leftists of all stripes should be focusing on providing that. And not whatever equality of opportunity is, or whatever, I don't even know what, half of, Democrats offer these days. Tax rebates on things. Food. Homes. School. Jobs. Things that people need to make their lives better now. And they will love you. That's what Kropotkin said, and that's what I'll say. Alright. Is it moral to like authors even if they're super misogynistic like D.H. Lawrence? Yeah, if you are going to, yeah. There are, trust me, there are very few artists who do not have a problematic part of their existence. It's just part of what you have to be. You have to be cognizant of those things, and you should be critical of those messages. But if you shut off a lot of culture, or if you shut off culture from anybody who has horrible opinions, you're not going to have a whole lot of culture to consume. Now, I would suggest that if somebody is really shitty and alive, you should try to make sure that if you do consume their content, it's not in a way that they get money from. If an author is alive, buy their book used, or if, things like that. Just make sure they're not getting money from your stuff. But besides that, be aware. All culture is all people have problematic opinions. I'm sure I have problematic opinions. I'm sure that if I wrote something that there would probably be problematic shit in it because I grew up in a culture that has lots of issues. But just be aware, be critical, and enjoy. Because just because an author made a book, it doesn't make it theirs. When you make a thing, despite what capitalism and copyright would tell you, when you make a piece of culture, you are giving it to culture. It's not yours anymore. J.K. Rowling. Who is the best leaders in the world right now, in your opinion? Ooh, that's a tough call. I'm going to go with that guy in Uruguay. The president of Uruguay. He seems pretty chill. Yeah. If all politics is local politics, how do you deal with problems that face larger regions? How would wars or nuking asteroids work if there was no central government? It's called cooperation. Play the game of cooperation. Where people work together as friends and do awesome stuff all the time. Because an anarchist society would be locally focused doesn't mean it wouldn't have lots of collaboration, cooperation, trade, and fun and stuff.
I think that song could use a little work.
Yeah, that song could use a little work. Thoughtslime made me an anarchist and helped me with the example of my gender. Non-binary male. He, him is preferred, but they, them is fine. Well, that's awesome, some random geek. Thoughtslime has been really great for people exploring non-binary identities, and I'm glad that he's helped you. Alright. Do you have thoughts on the Gaia hypothesis, the idea of looking at all life as part of a superorganism? It's, in some ways, it's anthropomorphization, but in some ways it's interesting. I think it is good to think of humans as part of an ecosystem, part of a greater whole than just humanity, but also that's difficult. I'm just looking at the thing and looking at the numbers just going down as soon as I start singing. All right. What kind of history do you do? Well, some random geek. I don't do history anymore. I used to be a PhD student that dropped out around this time last year, actually. And what I did was sort of at the center of memory studies, American history, communication history, and technology history. So media, communication, technology, and United States. And specifically, I was trying to do a sort of McLuhan-esque study of 9/11 and explore the idea of how we construct narratives about ourselves. So one of the things that I was working on was like one of the peak things about, or one of like the most important aspects of post-traumatic stress is the concept of the breakage of narrative. Many times, one of the number one things that's done in therapy for people suffering from post-traumatic stress is they try to recontextualize their life story, including what happened to them. It's part of recovery. And in my mind, or my research was also showing that there was, because of mass media, because of the internet, because of ubiquitous cable television, that 9/11 as an event was created to some sort of extent a cultural post-traumatic stress on the country. And on top of that, that it sort of has a break with the American narrative. And I was trying to study to see how they either handled it, how Americans either tried to integrate 9/11 into their self-concept, or how them not doing it has resulted in some of the actions of the peculiarities of how weird post 9/11 America is. And that was my dissertation in a nutshell. But the problem with it was that it was really big, really ambiguous. I really had no strong theoretical lens to look through things because I was amalgamating so many different theoretical models into my work. And on top of that, I was doing a lot of database analysis with a programming language that I've never worked with. And so I had weeks where I was just fighting with my laptop and I had no idea how to make any progress. And then a year passed and I had made zero progress on my dissertation because I just couldn't make anything work. And I lived 2 hours away from my campus, so it was really hard for me to get back and forth and talk with my supervisors. And at the same time, one of my supervisors was dealing with his wife having cancer, and the other one was on sabbatical. So I didn't really get much support from them. And all of that combined with the success of Step Back and my interest in pushing for history communications and media as a career sort of made me think that I needed to drop the dissertation and just focus on that, and that's where I got it. But that's basically what I was doing. What about psychohistory? Well, Devil Fox, psychohistory is actually pretty controversial in the discipline. I think that if you talk to many psychiatrists, you can tell from them that it's pretty hard to make judgments about the way that somebody's mind works, especially psychopathologies and all those things, without having a conversation with them. And so very often, and also there is in some instances of mental illness and psychopathologies, there is an element of a social construct in them. Not entirely. There are biological bases in them, but sometimes, for example, if you were to take somebody raised in like the 18th century and brought them to today, like your average 18th century child would have gone through what in the 21st century would have been considered horrific child abuse their entire childhood. And yet, because it was more ubiquitous, the ways, like the sort of trans era analysis of things like that is difficult to do. And most people don't think that there's like a way that you can really make hard conclusions or conclusions that mean much of anything from like analyzing someone's writing to see what their psychology was like. But it's still a thing that some historians do. It's kind of like evolutionary psychology in that sense. That's a thing that some people do, but in the field it's considered highly controversial and very dubious, and the people who do it don't really get taken all that seriously. Did you hear about how Emperor Akito of Japan will abdicate the throne at the end of the month? No, that's kind of cool. Is it just like going to somebody else, or is it like are they like getting rid of the title? All right, Radical Reviewer. Did you happen to talk about? Did you happen to talk about that? Went on with the Smurfs and all. I think I missed the context of that conversation. It's going to his son. Okay. Not really all that well versed on Japan, so I don't really know how significant that is. When you gave that talk about how you think technology will make socialism inevitable, how did all the apolitical nerds in the audience react? Nobody's... The only person who has... that's sort of like a basic superstructure and base argument. I think that, honestly, there are some Marxists who have taken umbrage with it more than most people. I think that there's a very reasonable argument to be made that technology can be manipulated in ways and can be is still a political action, and it is a like the culture that makes technology and the social construction of technology. See, the thing is, like, it was oversimplified. It was an oversimplified description of superstructure and base from a classical Marxist point of view. And in my mind, in retrospect, it was overly simplistic, especially for somebody who has like read books on the social construction of technology and the like the idea of black boxes and the ways that societies develop new ways to reconfigure material to make it into to make the things that we want to do. And in that way, if you think about a society that rewards the invention of capitalist, like technology to aid in the capitalist project, then you're not going to end up with technology that aids in the socialist project unless you are going strictly against the system, because otherwise we're going to be developing more and more technology to aid in making capitalism more efficient. Whether or not that just leads to a complete collapse of society, in which case we can rebuild in a sort of classless fashion, that's a thing that I don't know the answer to. And I think that that sounds fairly apocalyptic and probably not the way that we want to do things in a way that is beneficial and permanent. Thoughts on Ayn Rand? Ayn Rand is a bad philosopher and a bad person, and nobody should like them. Suppose both Bernie and Hillary died in 2015 and it was Liz Warren running against Trump in 2016. Do you think that she would have won? I mean, the world that's created by Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton dying in 2015 is that's a tough one. Like, I do think I do think that Elizabeth Warren would have beat Donald Trump in that case. Like, I think that Donald Trump didn't so much win as much as Hillary Clinton lost, and the Democrats lost. Elizabeth Warren has, like, opinions that, even though she's got a crappy voting record, she has a... she's also not great at campaigning, but honestly, the bar is pretty low for beating Trump in 2016. That I think she could have done it. Literally, anybody who was not Hillary Clinton could have run against Trump and won. But here we are. Oh no. Okay. I'll be running a stream roundtable discussion on comparisons between 1930s and 2010s with Mike Stutchbury, Kevin Logan, others would be interested in joining in. That really depends. If that stream is any time between tomorrow and the 13th, I have to say no, because I'm traveling next week and I got to get ready. So there you go. That's my answer. If it's after the 13th, maybe we can talk, but honestly, I haven't even thought about what my plans are for after the 13th. All right. Doughboy DeVito, what do you think about fraternities and sororities? They're kind of a mess. I never really liked them when I was in university. I've never been in one, so I can't really speak from the inside experience, but I've never seen any really great defenses of them. All right. Henry Rollins asked, out of 300 million people, there are two choices for president. People wouldn't trust... why out of 300 million people are there two choices for president, people you wouldn't trust to do your laundry? Yeah. It's because the system that gets people into those two positions is... definitely benefits a certain type of personality that is not conducive to being very trustworthy and nice. Okay. The Christchurch shooter named a bunch of prominent right-wingers in his manifesto. Suppose some tanky shut up a corporate board meeting and named you in their manifesto. How would you react? I would have made an entire video about how that... how violence in that case is terrible, and that first of all, I'd have a long think about... Sorry. So first I'd have a long think about what could I possibly have said to have radicalized somebody to commit a mass murder. Second of all, I would have made a video addressing it, and I would have made a video talking about it'd be really tough for a pacifist to inspire somebody to mass violence, but people can be easily misinterpreted, and I would discuss why I think violence is abhorrent and why that person was wrong, not only for the actions they did, but the ideas behind them. And I would address it, confront it directly, and I would tell people that if you are a person who believes that that mass violence can in any way make the change in the quote-unquote, because if they're a tanky, right? If you think that mass violence in any way can create the conditions for quote-unquote the revolution, then you are deluded, and you are a danger to yourself and others. And that I do not want them watching my channel. That would be how I'd do it. Honestly, if PewDiePie, since this question is really about PewDiePie, if PewDiePie just had a video where he said, "Hey, I don't like racists, and if you're racist, fuck off, I don't want your money," that'd be fine. I would be like, all right, like that's literally all I want him to do. And also, don't be racist. But like, start with that. Because I'm not this kind of person. Like, there's like, ever since I made the radicalization funnel video, there's like this idea, everyone takes this extraordinarily simplistic read of what I said and said, oh, Tristan blames PewDiePie for like Donald, like, or like, what's it called? Tristan blames PewDiePie for the shooting. And it's like, that's not what I said. I explicitly said not that. And what you need to do is friggin' PewDiePie is just a dumbass on the internet, but who has to realize is he has to analyze where he sits in a system of radicalization, and he needs to speak about the place he does in it. Like, it's literally just about having some self-awareness and discussing it. That was literally all I wanted. This is like, the direct responsibility is like, it's bullshit. That is a canard that has been put up by the right in order to deflect discussion about the conversation, that when you have a platform, you have a responsibility. You have to think about the things you say. You have to be aware that you are going to be misinterpreted when you say stuff, and you need to be cognizant. And yes, I do know that PewDiePie has said, hey, this was terrible. But he hasn't talked about how, hey, Nazism's bad. If you're a Nazi, stop watching PewDiePie. I do not want you in my audience. He hasn't done that. He still has not interrogated, as far as I can see, why his content radicalized somebody like this, or why his content was part of a system that radicalized somebody like this. He doesn't realize that, hey, maybe saying racial slurs and normalizing that was maybe part of why people are becoming more and more radicalized and racist these days. He hasn't thought that maybe when you have 80, 90 million people in your audience, that maybe that confers with you just a tiny bit of responsibility. And I know it's hard to do. Us content creators, YouTubers or whatever, us, like, it's hard for, and sometimes it's hard for us to appreciate how famous we are. And to realize that the things we say have impacts on other people who have real lives. And because we're not like traditional media celebrities, it's kind of hard to really process that. Yet, we should. Because, yeah, we just should. Especially because PewDiePie is such a young audience. And a young male audience who are like the prime targets for this kind of radicalization. So Alfonso Oliveira, hey, so my birthday is coming up in a couple months, and you should make a video about socialism in Colombia so I can radicalize this guy I'm seeing. Well, Alfonso, happy birthday in a couple months. I am currently, just to let you know how the pipeline works, I am currently in the early stages of working on a video that is coming out on June 30th. So, you got to get really, really early in the process if you want to get me to make a video. And I am very sorry that I can't make a video for your birthday. As of today, I have 48,000 subscribers. I would be making people's... If I made a video for everyone's birthday, I'd be making, like, several hundred videos for people's birthdays every day. You should read E.M.N. Banks' culture series about the a stage-free anarchist society that spans the entire Milky Way galaxy. Yeah, probably. There's a lot of books I should read. On that male radicalization thing, thanks for being part of stopping me going on that path. I really appreciate it. Well, thanks, Graham. I'm glad that you... I'm glad that I was able to help with you getting out of that life. Because, yeah, even, like, I think that, you know, even I could have been one or two bad steps away from going down that thing. Like, there's a lot of young people who have very dismal futures ahead of them. And that is a vicious combination that could end up with, some very different things. How much would I have to pay you to do a mini-series? Oh boy, I'd have to think about it. It would be a lot. It would not be like $10. It would probably be... That would probably be in 4 digits. To do a 3 to 5 part mini-series. You didn't really become a leftist until you were 17. Before that, I called myself a liberal who sympathizes heavy with communists. Oh boy. Alright, thoughts on separating art from artists, cancel culture, etc. Oh gosh. So I am very much a person who believes that while I actually am not a death of the author person. I think that you can, to quote the Dark Mother, you have to you can enjoy problematic art without embracing its message, and criticizing it does not mean that you don't like it. And you are perfectly able to enjoy the creation of artists who have very different worldviews. Like, I mean, for example, Ender's Game is like one of the greatest novels ever written. It was written by a fucking horrible human being, but it's a great novel. And yeah, you really can't separate Orson Scott Card's like right-wing libertarianness in it, but it's still good. It still has interesting insights about humanity in it. I would never buy a new copy of Ender's Game. And on top of that, like, yeah, I think I think we've already, this is kind of like ground that we've tread before earlier tonight, so I won't get too much into that. Cancel culture. I'm really conflicted about cancel culture. In some ways, I see it as one way that we can institute, like, you know, getting rid of people who are obviously abusive from leftist spaces. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. On the other hand, I do think that I am a firm believer in redemption, if they are willing to make redemption. And at the same time, I do think that these sort of exiling people from leftist spaces will more often create somebody who goes to the radical right than fixes things. But also, that doesn't mean that people who are victims of another person should be forced to confront that person on a daily basis. And so I don't think there's a comfortable answer. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Because I don't really think there's an answer that makes me happy. If we canceled everybody who is shitty and who hurts others, we'll have safer spaces to exist and to do things, but we're probably going to create more of our enemies. If we make a strong statement to not cancel people and to include people, even the terrible people in our communities, then we're going to create a place that is toxic and terrible. And I don't like either of those answers. So maybe there's some sort of answer between those two that I don't know at the moment, and I don't think they're like, there doesn't necessarily need to be a correct answer, and that's ambiguity, and I know everybody hates ambiguity, but that's kind of where I'm at. I was born in 1993. What generation does that make me? 255. That makes you a millennial. Makes you 5 years younger than me, so you're a millennial. Was leaving university a good choice for you? Yes. It was one that took a very long time to come to, but where my career was going and what I was doing, like, I was in university doing a PhD, which really would have left me with the career prospects of going into, like, it would have, the career prospects of doing the PhD in history. Like, I was in a situation where, like, okay, the things I wanted to do with my life, I could already do with the education I already had. And doing a PhD, all it would really accomplish is make it slightly harder to get those jobs or to get started in those careers and delay me starting my career by a few years. That was the main thing. Now, there was the argument that having the university career allowed me to have a much less structured life, that I could do my work, but then I could also do my creative stuff on the side and get it to hopefully the point where I could live off of it by the time I finish the PhD and I don't have to worry about any, like, jobs in the meantime. That was sort of the thing that was keeping me in it. But I was getting to a situation where, like, making progress, like, doing a PhD takes a lot of fucking time. And I was also living, like, basically under the poverty line, making that much, or was making, if I lived on my own, I'd be under the poverty line. And I was just kind of in, like, it was just a situation where it's like, this education that, like, less than 1% of people get. I was feeling like I was failing at life because I wasn't getting this extremely prestigious degree that very few people get. When I already had 2 degrees that very few people get. So I'm already very highly educated. I'm already in, like, the 99th percentile of education in the world. And on top of that, I'm, pushing for a career that's closer to what I want, and I didn't need any more education. So I left, and it was very amicable, and most, like, no one has criticized me at all for my decision. And my supervisors were both very supportive, and they think that it was a good decision given everything that was going on. So I think it was fine. Did you read the Guardian article I posted in the Discord? Yes. So it came down to homophobia and religious homophobia, so that doesn't surprise me. But, like, from the way that you were talking, that it was talked about anyway, it was like, oh, it's like Sharia law. And it's like, no, it's just like a bunch of religious people who happen to be majority Muslim in this case had a put around a homophobic petition because they were against teaching about gay people existing in school, and that sucks, and they probably shouldn't do that. That's it. Is rape a learned behavior or something men have to be taught not to do? I've been reading a lot of Roman historical fiction lately. It's not me wondering about... It's got me wondering about this. It is a learned behavior. It is a behavior of a concept of masculinity that is steeped in violence and power over women. Or power over others, because men also rape men. It is the behavior that comes out of a privileged class that defines sex and dominance in the same vein as each other. That they do not see sex as something that is a mutual thing, but as something that is done from one to the other. And trust me, more people have thought about it than I have. And of course, there's the whole animal kingdom stuff, but it is not a thing. We are much closer to, like, free love bonobos than we are to, like, ducks. So, that's it. Is Candace Owens a communist accelerationist? Oh my god, I forgot that Candace Owens existed. If she's the person I think she is, she's like this, like... Candace Owens... Okay, never mind. That's not the person I'm talking about. Candace Owens, a conservative commentator and political activist. Okay, yeah. I don't know much about her. I've seen her. I've seen her in stuff, but I don't think I know much about her. I thought you were talking about... There's like a Twitter... I think there's a Twitter... like a turbo-centrist on Twitter whose name is Candace, but I think has a different last name. Yeah, so... Okay, so from what I'm hearing in the chat, Candace Owens sounds really shitty. I know that she's like a shitty right-wing conservative, but that's all I know. But I know there's a different Candace who's a Twitter centrist, and she's the, like, epitome of, like, centrist, white, liberal, feminist type, like, very much, like, was, like, totally in the bag for Hillary Clinton, and, like, was very, I'm trying to remember who this person is, but I don't know if she's on Twitter anymore. But she was just a Twitter personality. But this is not Candace Owens. That's a different Candace, I guess. Okay. Can you do a video about people who still worship the Hellenistic religion? Also, hello. Hey, Only Bro. Maybe. Be interesting. I'd have to talk to one of those people. Like, I'll tell you an example of, like, the kinds of things that have gotten me to make videos from that, like, viewers have said to me to get me to make videos. I had a leftist Mormon email me to ask to make a to say, hey, you've talked about Mormonism in a couple videos. If you ever made a video about Mormonism, I will do a Skype call with you and I will answer all your questions. So that was one example of somebody who got me to make a video about Mormonism by literally willing to talk to me. I've had people who have told me interesting stories or who have pushed me to just be like, hey, look at this. But like I said, I am sitting on the idea page of, like, on my idea website thing, hundreds of step back video ideas. And on top of that, I have a database where I have something like 800 potential video ideas that I'm just sitting on. And I'm planning on making like one video a month going forward. And so I have to be very careful about what I make my videos about, because if you make one video a month, that means that they have to be something that'll be compelling, something that will be, that, you know, my mind just goes like, yes, like a good story, something that I know people will like, something that will be shared well, things like that. I might be able to pick up the pace later, but I would have to wait until, I was able to afford to pay an editor. And at the moment, that's just not going to happen. So I gotta do the thing. But honestly, like, right now, the big thing I'm trying to change is make things more narrative, and I want to find more interesting stories, especially stories that either take something that people know about and look at it a completely new way, or a story that is really awesome on its own things that I really need to do. How much does an editor cost? An editor, I believe I talked to Harry, who runs H-Bomber Guy, and he said that an editor costs about $40 an hour. Which could be like like $300 or $400 for a video, and that's like a shorter video. So it really depends upon how extensive your edits are and what you plan on doing. Like the more effects you throw in, the more things. It's very much like a freelancer thing. I'm nowhere close to that. I'm still struggling right now to get to a position where I can afford to do step back and not also have a full-time job, or at least like a 0.75 time job. And so like I can't even think about hiring editors until I am fully working on step back on my own time, which I haven't even gotten to yet. So like that is stage one. Patreon.com/stepbackhistory. That is stage one, and stage two could be like paying people to make stuff. All right, Tuesday's creations. Do you think that the people a YouTuber collaborates with reflects their character? Should YouTubers be cautious about who they promote in their channels? Yes. You should at least be cognizant and aware, and you should try to be aware. I know that some people have agonized over this. I think it's a thing where, like, you can't... When you make a video with somebody, in some ways you're bound to them forever. Depending upon how egregious that person's fall from grace is, you definitely should do your research before you collaborate with somebody. And if they go really hardcore, you might want to even take down that video that you did with them. But for the most part, it's a thing you should do before you do the collaboration. All right, where are we? You made me more left. Trump made me not a centrist or a rightist. Well, there you go, Jeb. Was it because Trump bullied you so hard? during the primaries? Is that what made you not a centrist anymore? And then you became a leftist because so Jeb Bush, after getting what's it called, 3 delegates, paying $50 million a delegate, disappointing Papa, and realizing that you lost the chance to be the president when even your idiot brother was president, and then lost in that miasma, you went, I'm going to watch this Step Back History guy, and then you became a radical. This is what I'm choosing the story to be. So we'll see where that goes. The reason I'm a lefty now is because Cody collaborated with you. Well, Orange Man, that's awesome. That's really awesome. That's an amazing... I'd love to hear that story. Did you, like, just watch the collaboration I did and that kind of got you into my stuff? That's awesome. It still really, like, hits me pretty hard that the stuff I'm doing is actually having an impact on people's lives. And I'm glad that I was able to help you in your journey that you made on... Like, you made it on your own. I was just there to help, but... Your realization and moving towards your politics. I think that's awesome. I'm glad that I could have played a part to help. When people ask Christy Winters why she liked capitalism, she usually says something like, capitalism is really good at creating efficient systems. What do you say to that? What? Have you seen capitalism? We have people whose entire career is trying to figure out how to get people to smoke more cigarettes. Like, where is this efficiency? We have people whose entire jobs are to try and hunt down other people who haven't paid their debts fast enough. Like, if you read, like, bullshit jobs, you'll realize that, like, some, like, huge percentage of the jobs that we have right now are just made to manage and middle manage and uphold, like, a completely unjust system. Like, if capitalism was so efficient or so great at creating efficiency, like, why would we need, like, very strong, like, a huge, like, list of do's and don'ts for why, like, how creating ideas can be monetized? Like, I don't know. That is just, like, capitalism is a lot of things. Efficient, not one of them. Oh, thank you, Comrade Archer. I really appreciate that. Do you have a business email? Glitch42, I do. It's Tristan@stepbackhistory.com. That is my business email. That is Tristan@stepbackhistory.com. A wingless monkey. Do you like twisty puzzles / Rubik's Cubes? Yes. I used to have a Rubik's Cube. I think I lost it when I moved. But I used to have a Rubik's Cube, and I used to solve it all the time. I used to really like doing that. I had a Rubik's Cube that I was trying to learn the algorithms for solving it, and I got pretty good at it at one point, but then we moved and I lost it and I never found it again, so I never got another Rubik's Cube. But I like Rubik's Cubes a lot. Alright. The problem is that people don't agree with what counts as canceling, and this imposed shitty people. I'm going to leave them off. Yeah. Cancel culture is complicated, and I think that it's got issues. For sure. Any thoughts on the culture of the grand species from Star Wars? They have a socialist government with a council is made up of randomly selected citizens. I don't really follow Star Wars that much, especially the extended universe. I've watched each of the new Star Wars movies a single time. I'm not a huge I don't hate Star Wars. I think each of the Star Wars movies I've seen are fine, but it's not my favorite thing in the universe. It's not like Star Trek to me. So I don't really, and I think that the Grand sounds like some sort of extended universe thing, so I have no idea. But when you're talking about the random selected citizen thing, it's called sortitionism, and I think it's interesting. I think it's cool. If we had to have representative democracy, like if we came to the conclusion that we absolutely could not manage direct democracy, then I think sortitionism would be a better way of choosing our representatives than elections, and I think it would be actually more democratic. All right. I would like to have a PhD, probably in philosophy, but sometimes I wonder if that's really the best path for me, or if I'm just trying to seek validation because intelligence is a big part of my identity. Well, Tuesday's Creations, let's talk a little bit about that, because even if you choose to do nothing with it, there is still a value in taking a PhD. If you want to do a PhD, you will at least get 4 years. Hopefully, most universities you'll be paid, so you'll have 4 years where you are spending all of your time doing philosophy. If you have a philosophical angle, if there is something that you really want to investigate, you have 4 years to make it your entire life. And even if you choose to not become a philosopher, you can at least say, hey, for 4 years of my life, I got to do this. And that's pretty cool. It does come with costs. A lot of people end up in debt through one way or another. Also, you're going to be about a step behind on your career. Like right now, like I am 30 and basically doing entry-level positions, and you'll be probably something between the ages of 27 and 30 and starting your career in the same place where a lot of 22-year-olds are. But that's not insurmountable. And also, as a PhD student, even if you don't take philosophy, or even if you don't do philosophy for your career, you're going to learn how to be extremely self-driven. You'll learn how to problem solve better than anybody else, and you'll be able to you'll be very resourceful. And so, even though you'll get a late start, it's fairly likely that you will shoot up in your career pretty fast, because you'll make yourself pretty useful pretty quick. You'll have learned quite a bit. So it's really whether or not that calculus all fits in for you. But I will say, you will never feel more special, and you'll never feel more appreciated for your creative work and your intelligence than the time that you're doing as a PhD student. When you are writing articles that are getting like actual thoughtful feedback, when you're presenting at conferences, when you're getting like, you know, paid travel to go across the country to go speak at conferences, like very few people get to experience things like that outside of academia, and so it's not bad. Not to mention, once you're done, you have a PhD, and that's an accomplishment that no one can take away from you, no matter what job you end up doing afterwards. I think we need to distance ourselves from thinking that the only purpose of education is to get jobs. I feel like we really need to stop that idea. Do you like electronic music? I mean, I don't hate it, but I don't really know much about it. All right. Does left YouTube embolden people to fight for change, or just let people feel validated and content not to act? I don't know. I hope it's making people do more. I think it's bringing more... I feel like YouTube is bringing ideas that were typically not given the light of day, and that's resulting in people being more critical of capitalism and inequality today than I think they've ever been, which means that's more butts in rallies and things like that. But I don't know. It depends upon what you think of as useful praxis. I mean, if you think that people will feel validated through YouTube but then not actually do anything, I think it changes the way... I think that it'll change the way people vote. It'll change the way that people act. Whether or not it's like I don't know how, like, whether or not it's going to be useful for like the real praxis people, you know, the lifelong activists, the people who live in a commune and like they will never miss a protest and all that kind of stuff, which I think like the real like I do shit activists, like I think Radical Reviewer, you're kind of in that camp, if I remember correctly. You're a pretty active activist in the real world. Whether or not it creates more people like you, I don't know. But if it creates more people who are not pounding the pavement with their picket signs every weekend, but are still sympathetic to our ideas, I still think that's a positive. All right. Thoughts on the tiny house movement? I think the tiny house movement is like peak neoliberalism ideas about how to solve homelessness. We have more empty houses than homeless people, but our solution is definitely to make little houses. Stalinism is almost indistinguishable from fascism. In what ways are they distinguishable? Well, that's a good question. Fascists and Stalinists are different because Stalinists are future-oriented. They are still working with the idea that they are building towards socialism. Fascists are very nostalgic and they are very backward-looking. Stalinists are nationalists, but not nearly to the extent that fascists are. So the reason why they become murderous totalitarian regimes are different, but they are still murderous totalitarian regimes. All right, I think Radical Reviewer is actually gone, so... all right. I prefer to be a social justice gnome wizard. That's great. Isn't the value of getting a PhD getting to call yourself doctor when you make restaurant reservations? I mean, it's pretty fun. My wife is a doctor, and so sometimes she uses it, sometimes she doesn't. When was the last time you got someone to call you doctor?
At work every once in a while.
There you go.
I put it on our plane tickets too.
There you go. So you can put on plane tickets and stuff like that. No, I mean, it's still nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. She said yes. It's not a PhD, but the general knowledge of my sociology degree has helped me massive in daily life and understand the world I live. It may be not generating $100,000, but it's nice. It's important. Yeah, I do think that. Doing higher education, I do think that post-secondary education gives you a lot of value that even if you don't do a career that requires a post-secondary education, it's still very enriching. I think that having some time to explore ideas and live in a world where debate and ideas are the main things that you're doing, and learning is like your vocation, and on top of that, spending a lot of time being social with your friends away from the, preferably anyways, away from the context in which you grew up, so away from your parents' house, hopefully even away from your parents, to give you some time to become your own person and figure out who you're going to be, I think is an extremely valuable time in your life. And I would never want anybody to not do that, even if they had no interest. I think even if say if I had a kid who really wanted to become an electrician, I would even argue that I would probably say, hey, okay, then just go do a university degree in anything you feel like doing, and then you can go become an electrician. Just to get you some time to just go and become your own person for a bit and not have to worry about the day-to-day grind of work, and just kind of develop from adolescent to adult. In the U.S., we have a problem where well-intentioned legislatives shouldn't pass it sometimes, but they're underfunded in opposition administrations and badly implemented. Could this happen to single payer? Oh, yeah, it could. Definitely. But I do think that once single payer is in effect, I think that messing with it would end up being like messing with Social Security, and that it would be like the third rail politics. Are you ignoring my anti-theist question I asked? No, I just missed it. What's it called? Chat moves fast. So if you could re-ask the question, that'd be great. But no, I am a human being, and I don't have an automated thing that collects questions. I'm just copying and pasting while I'm talking, which is very easy to mess up on one or the other. If you haven't realized that I just sometimes drift off and get distracted, it's because I'm like trying to keep up with the chat and copy down all the questions and also try to say things while also trying to answer some of the hardest questions I've ever been thrown at, because you guys always ask the tough ones. So this is a very brain-heavy activity I do on... You're not omnipresent. No, I'm not, Emily. I'm very sorry. I'm working on it. I'm just, as far as I can tell, one dude. Maybe someday in the future, I will. I'll be able to throw somebody some change to handle the questions in these streams and just sort of feed me a stream of questions. But that tonight is not that night. Wasn't the whole thing about the Khmer Rouge about if you aren't exactly equal to everyone else, we kill you? I don't know. All right. Did you hear about the Japanese emperor leaving the throne April 30th? Yeah, we talked about it a bit earlier in the stream. I don't really know too much about Japan, so I can't really speak much to it. All right. What is the correct way to hang toilet paper? Now, there's two answers to that, Terry. There's the one that gets me in trouble and the one that doesn't. So, Kelly has very strong opinions about the proper way to hang toilet paper. My answer is not that. There's the over and then there's the under. My answer is thinking too much about how to hang toilet paper is the incorrect answer. And that if you're really worried about it, your life's pretty good. What is the Dr. Baker argument? I do not know. Doughboy DeVito. I like college because of the friends and drugs, but I hate the price tag and the capitalist propaganda. Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. Yeah, I don't hang the toilet paper. I just leave it on the sink next to the toilet. Well, that's one way to do it too, I guess. Screw the system, right? How do you feel about being entirely owned by Thought Slime? It has been a thoroughly pleasurable experience.
Do you have to say it like that?
What?
Thoroughly pleasurable?
Yes, it has been rapturous. I hang it the way my wife tells me to. Yes, Glitch482, that is the correct answer.
Yes, it is.
How to hang the toilet paper? The answer is however your wife tells you to. The Vuvuzuela opposition leader just got his diplomatic immunity revoked. Well, that is terrible. Don't do that. Do you know much about liberation theology? It's like a kind of branch of Catholicism that's really into sort of leftist ideas of justice mixed with Catholic ideas of justice, and I think it's pretty good. I think that the Pope Francis was kind of associated with that at its peak. It was kind of bigger in Nicaragua, but it's a pretty big thing in South America and Central America in general. Joe, I only know he exists because he... Thought Slime's great. Thought Slime is just great. I have to put mine in so the cats don't unroll the whole toilet paper all over the apartment. That is a good answer, too. My cats do not do that, but I know some cats do that. On the sink is the correct answer. In a communist world, how do you think a person's average daily routine would be, if one would even exist? I mean, in an ideal communist world, you get up, hang out with your family for a bit. If you want to work, you go work. Do whatever it is you want. I feel like a lot of jobs you don't have to do all the time. You don't have to do it. The thing about if you discount all the bullshit jobs that David Graeber would point out, that actually the amount of total labor time needed to run society would be a lot lower, and so people would probably not need to work nearly as much as they do now. So you might have 2 or 3 hours of work in a day if you work that day, and what you do could be varied. It could be varied in all sorts of ways. You don't have to do the same job every day. You don't have to do those things. I feel like it'd just be like, like, I feel like we all have this distinct feeling that there's just this, like, this pressure, this, like, just, like, crunch that, that you're always under the, always under the gun to perform, that, if you miss, you've got work, you've got things to do, and if you drop these things, you could lose your job, your life will fall apart. And, like, we're always just feeling this, like, this pressure, like, in our heads, like, as if, like, we're always just teetering at the edge of falling apart. And I feel like a life where that doesn't happen, where, you just don't have to worry about your basics being taken care of, and you can just work on the things you want to work on if you want to work on them, and really depends. Really, really depends. But I think there would be really, it would be a much, people would just living your life without that constant pressure would just be so nice. That kind of feeling like when you're on vacation and you get up and you realize, oh, I don't have to do anything today if I don't want to. Or, the university feeling where, like, I could do the essay today, but it's not necessary. I mean, it's not due for a while. So, Taiwan getting support from America is the craziest part of Trump's presidency. It's definitely a weird one. The fact that he, like, didn't understand the situation with Taiwan was pretty ugly. I had a sudden thought regarding the U.S. befriending China. Is it possible the USSR, flawed though it was, lost the Cold War because the U.S. got China to defect and to make all their stuff? That's a fairly likely option. I mean, the thing is that America adding China to their, the U.S., the U.S. and China repairing relations was already after something called the Sino-Soviet split, in which case it was the relationship between the USSR and Russia, the USSR and China had already been pretty bad and had pretty much severed by the time the U.S. came in to fix relations. So, in my mind, I don't think it caused the USSR to tank because that had already happened. All right. Whew. I've got one more question, and then maybe we'll wind down. How's that sound? Some people believe that automated communism would mean the exploitation of the global South to gain resources to build the machines. What do you think about this? I feel like that's going to need some clarification. I wonder who those people would be. I don't understand the premise. Like, why? Why do they think that automated communism would mean exploitation of the global South to gain resources? If resources are split evenly, the resources of the global North would be going to the global South as all. Yeah, you've got coltan, you've got things like that. And I mean, like, those are resources that would probably still come out. Although, honestly, in an automated system, and also in a communist system that didn't have, like, planned obsolescence, we wouldn't be using nearly as much resources as we're using now. And on top of that, there would be open sharing between the resources of the global North and the resources of global South. Hopefully, we'd be all helping each other with whatever it was that we could do. But, that's a different discussion. That's like, I don't see where this relationship gets necessarily exploitative, but I honestly, that might just be my lack of imagination because I've been talking at a rather frantic pace for 2.5 hours, and so I might be just getting a little a little low on the brain glucose at this moment. And on that note, I think as Jebby says here, Jebby needs his big boy nap now. I think Tristan's getting there too. And so this has been a really great stream. Peak concurrent of 71 people here at one point. That is, I think that's a new record for us for Step Back Tonight. So you guys have been great. I am so privileged to have you guys come out. Just a heads up, there's not going to be a stream next week. There's going to be no Step Back Tonight next week. I'm going to be on vacation. So no Monday stream, no Tuesday stream. But I'll be very much excited to come back right afterwards. So you guys have an amazing night. Have an amazing 2 weeks. And I hope to see you guys soon. Keep in mind, you're all special. You're all loved. You're all wanted. This is a world that has enough for everybody. So let's make that world happen. Good night.